So, of course, I'm here coming in right here at the end, and I want to tell you some of the good things about podcasting. You've heard so many good things, but there's some bad things too. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not thinking about podcasting as the long game, oh my goodness, you're going to be very, very sad indeed. So all of my super friends have been sharing all the good stuff, but there are some drawbacks too. And in fact, I'm going to call them some traps that you can easily fall into as a podcaster. But I also have some escape hatches to help you get out. Just to temper all the good stuff we've heard, and I'm writing off of some of what Matt said before, is that the number of downloads for the average podcast is like 147. I always tell people it's between 100 and 150. It's changed a little bit because there's more podcasts out there. But really, like Matt was saying, if you even can get 128 downloads, 147, 150 downloads, you're doing better than most other podcasts out there. If you're not going into podcasting thinking that you need at least 3 years, that's right, 3 years to build your audience, then you're really not thinking about the scope of podcasting. We now have 2 million other podcasts that you're competing with. Even the podcasts that are quote dead, maybe they aren't putting out new episodes. That doesn't mean that they don't have content that people are looking for. A lot of times people will have people listening to their very first podcast from years ago. People are still consuming that content. And then plus, to make a good podcast, you have to invest your time, which is probably your most valuable asset, plus the treasure to do that. So you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your podcasting experience. So let's talk about some of the traps that you can fall into as a podcaster. Are you getting into podcasting for the money? Oh my goodness. If you're thinking about monetizing right off the bat, or, this is your get rich quick scheme, then I have some really, really bad news for you. It's going to be a long journey for you to be a podcaster. I sometimes joke that I have been noticing a podcasting to crypto pipeline. I've noticed a lot of people abandoning podcasting and getting into crypto. And I'm like, oh, these are the get rich quick guys. I have now identified. So there is a portion of people who came into podcasting thinking this is going to be just nothing but money. And it's really, that's not going to be what you're going to be looking for right off the bat. There's plenty of opportunities to monetize, but you really have to be building a good foundation to start with that. Your escape hatch from this trap is to first think of your podcast as a catalog of your content, your ideas, your perspective, the things your expertise, and to believe that that content has value. If you go into it just thinking that you're building something with having your podcast, I think that that is going to be a mindset that's going to serve you well for that long run, for that time that you're having to build the audience and the 3 years that you're having to go, not getting the downloads and the results necessarily that you want. I also really recommend to people to think of a podcast as a self-sponsorship opportunity. When we were hearing that question from Dick, I was thinking, man, like, again, Matt was saying, if you are thinking of this as, I am going to be able to sell my expertise or my products and services, or act as a connection to, like an affiliate to things that I can truly endorse. I find that's going to be, for most of the clients that I've worked with, that's going to be the place that they're able to bring in more money from the podcast, is if you have that attitude of self-sponsorship first. And then finally, of list building. I can't tell you how important it is to be list building as a podcaster. People still make purchases based off of emails that they receive. So if you have a podcast, it's very important that you have an email list and that you're doing something to get people onto your list, because that's the way that you're going to be able to stay in touch with the people, the committed audience that really wants to be a part of what you're doing. Trap number 2, worrying about downloads. Oh, Matt Kendall, like you were just saying, if you're fixating on a measurement that really doesn't even matter, the thing that I recommend to people to really focus on instead of the downloads is to focus on engagement. Are they hearing from people? Are you asking to hear from people? Are you interacting with people on social media? That is the thing that's going to tell you if you are connecting with an audience, if you're connecting with people. It's not necessarily the downloads, but the people who have listened to it. Are they making that next step of connecting to you and really engaging with you? And if you're putting out a call to engage with people, that you're hearing back to them.
And Catherine, can I jump in for a minute there?
Yeah.
I love this suggestion, and I don't take it to heart enough. If you post something on social media, say on a Facebook page, and a bunch of people, half a dozen people, even if they're just your friends, say, hey, that was a great episode, blah, 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 or I can't wait to listen to this. They make a little comment on the next episode of your podcast. Read them, to give a shout out. Yeah, give it proof that it's the integrity of your show. There, it looks, and it really makes you seem like a legit show, even if you just started. There are 6 people who already are ambassadors for your show, and they're going to spread the word.
It's, there's a lot of podcasts that use the technique of reading reviews, positive reviews that they've gotten for that exact same reason, because it's saying there's a whole crowd of people that are enjoying what's going out. So yeah, there's a social proof aspect to that. Absolutely. When I say properly promoting your show, it's not just a marketing thing. There's a dirty little secret, especially that I've seen in podcasting. It really doesn't matter in some ways if you have any downloads at all. When you're out there showing that you have a podcast and that you're engaging in a popular and tech savvy type of medium, that conveys something to people. If you're an attorney, I was thinking of Evan specifically about this, that a lot of law firms and a lot of other attorneys are not tech savvy. So you have just set yourself apart by saying, not only am I an attorney specializing in my field, but I also am doing this other thing. I'm having this podcast. Podcasts are they're happening, and what have you. And it's just a great way to demonstrate to people that you're in the arena. You're making something, you're creating something. And that, even if people don't actually download your show, that is conveying something that I think is very important. So that's a little bit more of a dirty secret and a little bit of a sort of a positioning question, but I do think it is very valuable. And it's something that I underestimated a lot of my clients would be really looking for. So just really make sure that you're putting it out there, that you have a podcast and that you're doing it. And finally, the third trap, and this is more important than ever, is failing to know your audience. And Joyce, I'm specifically, you set me up perfectly for this. Knowing who your audience is far more important than I ever appreciated. We have been really hearing from people who work with sponsors. That's different than advertising. The differentiation there would be advertising is for a wide audience. Sponsors are looking for a particular niche. If you know who is listening to your show, you are going to be able to do so much more in terms of sponsorship for your podcast. The way that you know this, you get out of this trap of not knowing your audience or discounting how important that is again, you're interacting with your audience. You're doing listener surveys, whether it's contests or giveaways, or you have some sort of prize for filling out a survey. If you can start compiling the information about who it is that is listening to your show, first of all, you're going to find out that, one of the reasons that people are flocking to working with podcasts is because the podcast audience is extremely desirable. They're responsive. They're generally better educated. They're generally more affluent. So this is an audience that people want to connect with. But if you can articulate who is listening to your show, it is far more important to a valuable sponsor than how many people are listening to your show. I actually have an example of a friend of mine who was able to connect with a product that he feels very passionately about. He does not have a lot of downloads at all, but because he knows the demographics of who is listening to his show, he was able to get a sort of a baby step, first step relationship with a sponsor with a product that he really cares about for a sponsorship for his podcast. So those are some escape hatches from the very common traps that you might be designing to fall into.